It's Hollywood, the royal family, politicians left and right. They seem anti-American, but really, they're just anti-Christ. That was an excerpt from the new Tom Macdonald album, Declassified, a collection of songs that were initially only available on physical copies of his previous albums over the last 10 years, and now they've all been compiled into this project right here. And as you guys know, here on Research Reality, we review protest music, revolutionary music, to see how the lyrics relate, how they contribute to this culture of resistance. Like and subscribe if you want to support protest music. But some of you might be surprised to know that Tom Macdonald is actually already on the wall. He might be a little too small to see when I zoom in, but still, he is there because of one particular song, the song The System, which I think is a 10 out of 10 song, a track that can definitely stack up amongst some of the best songs on this wall. But even with that being said, Tom Macdonald is not the only artist on the wall that is problematic or controversial. This Anti-Flag album comes to mind, but I'm doing something with that very soon. So I put him on the wall because, again, to be fair and charitable, he does have songs that do contribute to the culture of resistance, but overall, for me personally, I do tend to disagree with a lot of his positions on a lot of his tracks. And honestly, if you want a really good rundown of some of his more controversial tracks, definitely go check out Anthony Fantano over on The Needle Drop, where he reacted to a lot of Tom's older stuff, most notably the song White Boy. And he can articulate a lot of the issues a lot better than I. However, for this album, while these tracks were released over a period of 10 years, we will be reviewing them again to see how they relate to the culture, but also how well did they age. And I think that as we get into this, we're going to find that a lot of this album kind of contradicts itself. A lot of these takes really did not age that well at all, and really some of the things that he's saying now in the current era, this current year, 2026, a lot of this is now just wrong. Like, completely. But he did choose to release this album now, so we will be reviewing it with all the information that we have now, despite some of these tracks being now obsolete or just missing the point entirely. But now, moving on to track 1, we have the song Anti. This track is actually how we opened the review. So honestly, it's not a terrible track. It's actually probably one of my more favorite tracks on the album. I believe this is the only one that is not a previous track. I think this is a brand new song that he put out for this album. So in terms of the messaging, I'm actually mostly on board, because what is he doing? He's calling out the PDF files in government, in Hollywood, the royal family, all of which is well and good. We need as many songs talking about the files as we possibly can. Shout out to Moonwalker and the song The Files. And he goes on to say that these people in power seem like they are anti-American, but really they are just anti-Christ. Now, are they really anti-Christ? I don't know, ask Peter Thiel. He seems to be rather obsessed with that topic, and Palantir, his company, just won the fucking contract for the Pentagon to use their AI models, so that's great. Would be nice if Tom mentioned something about that, but going down a few lines, he also mentions how QAnon did not make it up, saying that QAnon is justified in all of its beliefs because it turns out there are PDF files in the highest branches of government, Hollywood, again, the royal family, and just people in positions of power. But I still don't think that Tom's right to say that QAnon got everything right, because in actuality, QAnon, the biggest crux about it was that Donald Trump himself was going to be the savior and smite down all of these PDF files, and we know that's simply not the case. Ask fucking Sean Ryan. Because we have seen with this current Trump administration time and time again, people like Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi, and others who literally were all about exposing the files. Dan Bongino had his own podcast, and then he was the deputy director of the FBI, someone in a position of power to actually do something about this, and then he quit his job and now he's back to podcasting. What the fuck is up with that? Trump has actually done the opposite. He has protected these people. So again, overall, that's just a bullshit take. But now moving on to the second track, Equality. Again, overall, I can get behind the message of this song. Tom here is saying that he doesn't care about your ethnicity, your sexuality, your pronouns. He's cool with immigrants, and he's cool with trans people and the like, as long as they wave an American flag, which, to kind of go back to the first track, when he says they seem anti-American, and then here he's talking about waving American flags, The dude's fucking Canadian. Which, like, that's fine. You can be a Canadian and then become an American. You know, it's that whole fucking Reagan speech, how I can't go to Japan and become Japanese. I can't go to Chile and become a Chilean. But anyone across the globe can come to America and become an American. That was kind of the whole point. So I'm totally on board with Tom being an American, I guess, even though he is in fact Canadian. But of course, people who tend to listen to this music and follow these politics are the same people that are very happy about the borders being closed and closing off immigration. Unless we're talking about people from South Africa, at that point they're like, hey guys, come on in. So again, going back to the song Equality, I agree with the points that it doesn't matter where you're from, who you're with, what you identify as, because we are all in the same boat, we're all facing the same threats, the same struggles, and we are all in this together. It's just that this song will be contradicted by other songs later in the track list, which, speaking of which, the next track, Satanic Rappers, leans really heavily into, obviously, the Illuminati running the music industry, the satanic symbols and rituals, and how when these rappers are on stage or making a music video, they're really just performing some kind of evil sermon that the crowds are unwillingly taking part in. You thought that you went to a Lil Uzi Vert concert, but little did you know you were actually worshiping the devil because, as the song says, say Lil Uzi Vert really slowly, Lil Lucifer. Oh my god. But ultimately, I think Diesel Automatic said it best on his song, Illuminati, where he's talking about the Illuminati and how he feels like it's been brought up to be a bigger deal than it should be to hide us from the truth, making up a theory for which we will never find the proof, and that there's a lot you can point to, specifically the Telecommunications Act of 1996, I think, where it consolidated power among the record labels, and then you started to see a massive drop-off from the conscious rap, and you started to see a lot more about the music that Tom Macdonald will later on talk about, specifically how it relates to hip-hop. But that exact point that Diesel Automatic was making is literally the exact same thing that Tom Macdonald is doing here. Instead of explaining how we got where we are now, he just goes on saying that all of these rappers are satanic, instead of highlighting the very real corruption within the music industry. Sometimes you don't need a grand conspiracy or satanic worship, you might just need a profit motive. And besides, you think Kendrick Lamar is worshiping the devil? That guy puts God into every project he's ever done, while also painting pictures of resistance, again, on every single album he does. But then Tom goes on to mention that people actually say he's the one worshiping the devil, that he's actually a Satanist, I guess. I'd be curious what his thoughts are on like black metal, or like Dimmu Borgir, or just some shit like that. Or in other words, music that is well established, that has very strong satanic, or at the very least, anti-religious vibes. The next track, Hated, again, isn't incredibly wrong in what it's actually saying, that people will always find something to hate. They will always find an aspect to criticize, to critique, usually from the standpoint of you versus me or us versus them, which, yeah, especially people on the internet, they might hate this review. Hey, leave a comment down below if you just fucking hate this review. But again, this track is just kind of pointing out something that everyone already knows. It's not really highlighting anything of substance per se. The next track, Burnt Flags, is a little bit more interesting. And thinking back on those first few tracks on this album where he's talking about how people in government on both the left and the right are corrupt and commit heinous acts, and even on the song Equality, where we need to set aside our differences, set aside the things that are dividing us, and come together. Well, on a track like this, it sure does seem like he hates the liberals, saying that he sees the liberals getting louder, and then a bit of freedom dies. First they turn into communist, and then they turn into the T word, and they're going to incite a woke war based on everything you see on the television. A woke war like what? Bombing Iran? Does Iran have too many pride flags and weird gender identities? I don't get it, man. I don't get it. But it's also rather interesting that he has a line about how when people are burning the flags, they are wearing masks, and so he says you need to take your mask off and show your face. But again, I would be very curious to hear his thoughts on the ICE agents that are patrolling the streets, concealing their faces. If the ICE agents are doing something that they believe in, something that they're proud of, why don't they show their face? And I know I've mentioned this a few times, but just to reiterate again, Tom Macdonald is in fact Canadian, so the point that he's making about burning American flags, something that is actually protected speech, I'm not really seeing the issue here. This man is just really down for the cause. I would love to hear him make some tracks about Canada. Maybe he does have those tracks, and actually if he does, if I have any Tom Macdonald fans who have made it this long in the review, please link me one of the videos or songs that he's done talking about Canadian politics. I think that would be interesting as fuck, to be honest with you. Anyways, next track, Sweetie. Here he brags about having a #1 song on the Billboard charts, signed by the President of the United States. In other words, a #1 hit song signed by the guy covering up the Epstein files. Not exactly something I would be bragging about, but even if that song was written years and years ago, like say 2017, 2018, pre-Jeffrey Epstein, still I would not be releasing this song here in 2026, given everything we know. But that's just me. The next track, Worthless, is a pop song more or less, talking about how they canceled everything and now it's just gone to shit because everything that was once good has now been canceled. Like how if you happen to be a reporter and you ask the President of the United States the wrong question, you might get kicked out of the room and lose your access entirely. Or if you're a late night talk show host and you make the wrong joke about people in power, they might just take you off the air. Or if you want to criticize the current administration on Facebook, TikTok, or YouTube, they might just throttle your reach, which is the best kind of cancel culture conducted by this administration right now. There's another line about how they're going to take away all of our guns, which is also funny because Trump a few months ago was literally talking about doing just that. Next we have the track Every Rapper Ever, which again is overall decent, if a little exaggerated. I think he has some really good lines talking about when rappers glorify drugs or glorify a negative lifestyle, that it does have an impact on the people listening to it, how it might leave a bad impression for those who might not have a good role model or just any real support. So I get the overarching point that he's making, where maybe artists do have some kind of responsibility to not glorify the violence or glorify, again, just a negative kind of lifestyle. But at the same time, it is all just entertainment. It's just there to tell a story or invoke some kind of vibe or emotion. So I think you can separate the two, but at the same time, apparently on his last album, there were actually 2 tracks back to back that talked about drugs. The tracks White Rapper and High on You. So, as it turns out, Tom Macdonald also raps about drugs. But again, if we're looking for music or other rappers that talk about real shit, there is a lot of it on this wall. The next track, Spilt Milk, is more of a rumination on his life before he was a rapper, when he was a working class guy kind of struggling to pay the bills, which is a perfectly legitimate topic to write a song about, especially on an album like this, until he throws out a line about not believing in white privilege because he suffered as a white male who was below the poverty line. And I think that's the biggest problem with Tom when it comes to the topic of race, is that he never actually engages with the racism itself. It's always through the lens of this white victimhood. How because we have Pride Month and Black History Month, we need a white Pride Month. Not saying that's what he's really saying, but I'm just saying that's the overall tone, is that the white people are getting left behind, which plays into the white replacement theory and all that other dumb stuff. But again, it's just not having an honest conversation about human history and human slavery and the systemic racism that has existed in this country for centuries now. I think Brother Ali just put out a really good song on this topic. I'll link it down below. Or even Akala has a really good song, the Maangamizi, that I will also link down below, that really just explains how fucked up slavery was, and then the mentality that then continues on through the decades despite the Civil War, despite the civil rights movement. In the next track, Propaganda, we have yet another line where he says that the media is mostly controlled by the liberals. Now, I'm not going to sit here and defend every liberal news outlet because some people have made entire careers showing the hypocrisy that might come from a mainstream news source. But in the year 2026, if we are going to put out a song saying that the media is mostly controlled by the liberals, I want you to look at this photo and tell me who the fuck is there and where they are at. Tell me who bent the knee to the executive branch in order to get better regulation, better influence, all of the lawsuits that were either paid or dropped. Again, this is just an example of a track that does not hold up very well at all. Even the Twitter files did not show a grand conspiracy. And then in the second verse of this song, he shouts out all of the Trump supporters who were labeled criminals because the mainstream media is predominantly controlled by the liberals, which is very funny because when Trump gave that blanket pardon to the January 6th rioters, how many of those people would go on to commit violent crimes, abusive crimes, and find their asses back in jail? The number of names added to that list continues to grow by the day, kind of like another list that we all are very familiar with. Still, I would say the overarching narrative of this song is generally correct. That news stories, depending on publication, do not necessarily serve to inform you. They generally serve a purpose. They are there to make a narrative. But this narrative, the one that's being told in this song, is not a correct one. Again, I'm not defending every single liberal news station or commentator because there is a lot that you can point to and validly criticize. Which leads us to the next track, Just Like Me, where again he's calling out the liberals, he's calling out cancel culture, which at this point it just seems like a rehashing very similar to all of the stand-up comedians that continue to talk about cancel culture, that they can't say their edgy jokes because then people will dogpile on top of them, which is something that's not really a thing. Many of these people have never been canceled. Dave Chappelle, who I think is one of the greatest to ever do it, he himself makes so many fucking jokes about cancel culture despite the fact that there is no canceling of Dave Chappelle. And kind of like this song here, we're talking about things that are almost a manufactured talking point, that there's just not a lot of evidence, and if you have the evidence, leave a comment down below. And of course he goes on to say that everyone left of center is basically all the same and that they don't believe in individuals, which again, I will just raise my hand and say, I don't believe that. If anything, I think that individuals are fantastic. I try to highlight the individuals on this wall because again, all of the individuals on this wall make up the whole, and that is where the true power lies. It's the power of the collective. But the collective, of course, is made up of individuals. I don't know why I'm explaining this. And this might actually be the final point that I make for this album. But if we're talking about cancel culture or things that either the masses or people in positions of power try to reject or thwart to some degree in order to stop it from getting out to a bigger audience, maybe there's something that might be problematic for those in positions of power that they don't want to reach the masses. Well, I think that whole concept can actually be summed up quite well actually on Lowkey's album Soundtrack to the Struggle 2, where actually fellow UK rapper Akala is talking about Lowkey, saying that there's a reason why they don't play Lowkey's music on the radio. It's not that it wouldn't be popular, it's not that there isn't a market for it, that's the actual fear. The fear for those in power is that there is a market for this. There's a fear that this would actually resonate with the people, and therefore they will throw everything at you to try to hinder your success. They will make it as hard for you as possible, and that's one of the reasons why in China and Russia, music, especially rap, is heavily regulated and censored so that the people don't find the power that lies within music, because again, music is a very powerful force. And that's why I'm trying to highlight this culture of resistance in America while I still can. And on that note, I will conclude this review of Tom Macdonald's new album, Declassified. If you guys have heard this album, let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below. If you like liked this review or you hated this review, also let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If I had to recommend one track from this album, I guess it would be the track Anti, because it does hit on the files, kind of, and I think overall that message is a decent one. But when it comes to scoring this album, I don't really know how this is gonna go, because this is the first time that I've encountered a project that has so much misinformation, has a lot of inaccuracies, has a lot of contradictions. Even though I do vaguely agree with some of the points that it's making, overall I do think it does more harm than good. Again, this is not exactly a new project, this is just a compilation of songs from the last 10 years. But still, they were released now, and they really do not stack up to the present day. So to be honest, I'm gonna give this one an F. It's gonna be the first F I've ever given out. Not that this rating really matters much. The rating is really just based on how much it contributes to the culture of resistance, but when it starts impeding on that culture, when it starts pulling people in the wrong direction, it's not really helping things move forward to help build a better future for everybody. It's really kind of holding us back. However, if Tom comes out with any other album and has a different kind of message, like one that can be found on the track The System, I would totally be down to review it and see what kind of message that album would hold. So anyways guys, that'll do it for this video. Like and subscribe if you like the vibe. Check out the Patreon account if you're so inclined. And until the next one guys, stay well, stay safe, stay informed, and we will see you on the next one. Later.